Welcome to episode 6 of the Crackpot Podcast with James LaFond and Lynn Lockhart. This episode was taped on July 31st and will be presented in 2 parts. You're listening to part 2. Hey James, we're back from our break, and I thought we could go back to this idea of the gang over society, the superiority of smaller group with the leadership embedded into the group versus this diffused structure that we have in the federal government and even in the municipal government that we've been talking about with the police.
Okay, a couple of we'll stay in the ancient world instead of talking about the conquistadors. Okay. In the ancient world, the white Egyptian leadership employed black Sudanese police to collect taxes and to mete out punishment to their people. These guys would beat you, they would impale you. There were 5 different penalties that they would go around and inflict. This has Brew commented on this on one of his posts, and it's the way that all of the medieval Islamic nations ended up being run, where you had many non-Islamic interlopers, even white slaves that they kidnapped, like Thomas Pellow, who were brought in to operate these highly criminalized governments, and they were accessed by the leadership because all they had was power. They didn't really have any divine right or legitimacy. Only the caliph would have that. And after the Mongols took down the caliphate, it was just a bunch of sultans, and they're just war leaders, and they would rely on these outside mercenary forces to do all their work for them because these guys didn't have any support in the population. So if you take that in a modern context, you want to have a police force that comes from outside of the population. Okay, for instance, we have over 70% of Baltimore City police live in Pennsylvania or rural or suburban Maryland. They do not live in Baltimore City. So this is your classic interloper proxy force that's going to be really beholden to the government because they don't have any base. And to the extent that they're hiring cops out of Baltimore City, they're hiring black cops. And when you become a police officer, you're a traitor.
Yeah.
In that society. So again, there's separation there. The government knows that these guys are on their own. The only legitimacy they have comes from above. There's no grassroots support for these organizations. And that's what you want. The ancient Athens, before they were conquered by the Macedonians, who were Alexander and Philip, his father, they were the hillbillies of ancient Hellas. They employed a force of Scythian archers as policemen. So if you're an Athenian landowner, there's 25,000 free Athenians, everybody else is a slave. Even if you're one of these people, if you break the rules, you could be punished or killed by this dirty, smelly barbarian who's not even considered a human being by your conception of the term. Okay? Yeah. And that's a classic example of this interloper proxy force. Now, the Macedonians, under Alexander, which is Alexander's grandfather, became a client state of the Persian Empire. They were kind of laughed at by the Greeks farther south. But they weren't considered barbarians either. Those would have been the Thracians and the Agrianians and the Illyrians, those people. Philip figured out how to take his different ethnic groups. You'd have 3 different groups of people. There were small individual landowners that made good heavy infantry. There were small farmers that live in the mountains that you could make into a good phalanx. And then you had your rich boys that you could make into horsemen. So you had these 3 groups. You had the horse companions, the foot companions, and the phalanx. So I think phalanx meant roller in Greek. You're literally, it's a big rolling pin. You're going to roll everybody over with this thing. And they used, with other parts that were added to it, they used this army to take down all of the Greek city-states that relied on a phalanx that was armed like the foot companions. So this phalanx was no good against the other phalanx because their weapons were not long enough, and they didn't do well against the foot companions because they weren't mobile enough, because they were still a phalanx, and they had very weak flanking troops. So, they hardly had any horsemen. Once Greece was subjugated, except for Sparta, they made a deal with them so they didn't have to kill those guys, because they would have actually taken some losses killing them rather than what they did to the other Greeks. It looks like Alexander probably had something to do with killing his father.
Oh.
Because it looked like taking down Persia was going to be so easy that his dad was going to get all the glory and he wasn't going to get any. Some people think it was his mother, Olympus, that killed the father. And in any case, Alexander benefited by the demise of Philip. Philip had made the best war machine the ancient world ever saw. It was really more effective than the Roman legions later on, but you couldn't scale it up as easily. It pretty much had to stay at this 30 to 40,000 man strength. A Roman legion you could scale up bigger and it would still be effective. So I explained to you the three parts of this army that were: the phalanx was the anvil. This is what the other army can't penetrate.
Mm-hmm.
The anvil is the horse companions, who come in at an angle, and they usually win this battle at this 50-yard point of contact, and that's it. The whole enemy battle line will fold from there as soon as you pierce it. And the hinge between the two was the foot companions, and these would actually be Alexander's personal bodyguards. This wasn't enough, though, because the left flank of the phalanx is wide open. So you use mercenary troops to guard that, and then there's the problem with how do you antagonize, probe, and attack the enemy. They used two groups for this, and one was a mercenary, the Cretan archers. These were for-hire guns. They would run right up to these rich Persian nobles and shoot them right in the face and kill them. Okay, they were really feared. They're not given any credit really in any of the histories. And the other group was a group of barbarians called the Agrianians. Alexander was a personal friend to their king, who was their commander. It was about 1,200 guys. They only took about 20 men killed through all his wars and campaigns. Wow. They were in every battle. These were the guys that were key in taking every city. These guys were mountain climbers. They could do anything. And they're basically guys wearing a fox head cap, a fox fur cap, and a wolf hide poncho. And they throw these big darts, and they have this big wicked knife. They don't even have any armor. They'll have a little shield. And these were the guys that he actually used to conquer the world, because that batch of 1,200 guys would make the opening, with the support of the Cretan archers, would make the opening that his horsemen would go crashing through. And he would go right for the enemy general, and then the whole thing would disintegrate into a rout, and they'd kill him. So what he did is he progressively scaled everything down. First, he's taken this 30,000 man army, which is like a small town, through this giant empire of big cities.
Wow.
And he's reducing the whole empire as he goes. He fights various battles against armies that are about 100,000 strong and have pretty much all the same equipment that his guys have.
Yeah.
Except for the phalanx, but they had stuff that could get around that because they had so many. They had more horsemen than he had in his whole army, but he was always able to reduce the battle to this one point of contact. And that's how the gang overcomes a certain thing. Eventually, a gang will take down a government by inserting its people in a key unit that has access to the leadership. And so in these very large-scale modern information age things that we have, that's how the gang is eventually going to get in. And to a large degree, a lot of our government people are already bought. We've had Maryland, we've had officials in Maryland that have basically been owned by these drug gangs. And that goes all through Latin America. That's happened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I think even at a federal level, they're owned by other interests.
And one of the big openings here, the opening that is exploited by the aggressive gang, is the fact that once you get to an imperial level of force, which the U.S. has, but it's not a classic empire, it's more like the maritime empire that the Athenians and later the British had. It's not like the Roman or the Persian Empire was. the thing that really opens you up to exploitation by groups like the conquistadors or by Alexander is that a large empire has a government that's removed from its people by stages. They depend on employing these independent contractors to do their work. Mm. And those independent contractors can be infiltrated or flipped. And that's probably what we have going on with the CIA. It seems like the CIA is basically running its own state within the state.
Yeah, it's totally rogue. Yeah.
I saw that Putin just put out 745, I think, 700 and some people out of our embassy in Moscow, and it hasn't even addressed the other embassies that we have over there. And the reason why he put this number of people out was to bring it down to parity,
right? So
that we had the same amount of people at our embassy that he has over here, and most of those people are going to be CIA people.
I think so. Yeah.
So we've actually had like a whole village worth of spooks living right in the middle of town.
Yeah.
You know, Vlad Tepes wouldn't have put up with that. They'd have been sitting on poles.
Yeah. I like that column the article about the Christian hero king. That was a good one.
Oh, I always liked him. He was a great guy. There's one author had a theory, and it might be true, that the reason why he impaled people was because he had been raped by the Janissaries when he was held in captivity.
Yeah.
That could be a reason why he had a penchant for inflicting that punishment on these very same people.
Yeah.
Because the Janissaries were sickos. They were taken from Christian families.
Yeah.
They were indoctrinated into Islam. They didn't have families or women. They basically just raped dudes.
Yeah.
Okay. These guys were disgusting. There was like 40,000 of them, and they were good fighting men.
They were, well, why they were, I think that's a very funny anecdote that, the Ottomans had to kidnap their ruling class from Europe. And, as babies.
Most of them, a couple of generations of Janissaries just got wiped out. The Battle of Lepanto, a lot of them got killed. Where they took the most casualties was at the Battle of Malta, where the Knights of St. John and the Maltese just really butchered these guys. That was a great battle. But in that one, you essentially had the people that were defending Christendom at Malta. Mm-hmm. This was an independent enemy. This is really like the Vatican. This was it was sub-state level, and they couldn't get help. Yeah. The English wouldn't help them.
No.
I mean, Elizabeth wanted to see these people go down and wanted to deal directly with the Turks and not have to deal with these Catholics.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, that I kind of went off there, but where the battle was decided is often a very small place, and then the ripple goes out from there.
Right.
It's like taking one of those sabot rounds and slamming it into a tank. It just makes a little hole in the armor, but it destroys everything within it.
Right.
When it gets inside there. So that's the kind of thing that military people have always looked for, and it's the thing that gangs and local militia are good at.
Yeah, just by virtue of their size, they can't even.
They have more cohesion.
Yeah.
And they have better intelligence.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times our remote intelligent, nerds sitting at the Pentagon looking at satellite feeds has ended up with us dropping a bomb on the wrong guy.
We'll never know.
That's another problem.
Yeah.
When your intelligence is so far removed, you just don't have the benefit of proximity.
Right.
And you just learn that when you're involved in fighting, that's what you learn. That's at some point the proximity of combatants just changes the game, and it'll usually change the game in one party's favor immediately and decisively.
Well, I think this really helps people understand, and we got comments. You got some comments on the YouTube posting of the Kevin Michael Grace interview. They couldn't imagine. I think it's true for a lot of people. We just can't really imagine how could the cops be the bad guy, or how could they fail to enforce the law.
My estimate is that probably about 30% of cops are rotten, and the rest of them aren't.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's the same thing with the black population. About a third of these people are just straight up criminals, and the rest of them aren't.
Yeah.
But if you think about this, if you imagine that you're working somewhere, and you don't know who they are, but you know about 3 out of every 10 people that you work with are involved in criminal enterprises, stealing from the company, getting people fired, doing really sleazy stuff.
That's a huge
Okay.
portion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, how many times can you turn over your shoulder and say, you know what? I think maybe Ed's taking coffee out the back door. Okay. Now you might say that to the first person and they're a straight employee. Okay. But if 3 out of 10 people are criminals, by the time you say something to the second person,
yeah,
you're talking to a crook.
You're talking to his accomplice. Yeah.
Right. So this is a very scary situation for somebody to be in. So you have a lot of good cops that are stuck between criminals and criminal cops.
Right.
And now on top of that, you have these, you have a leadership in the city that's just willing to throw them under the bus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just a bad spot for them to be in. We've had instances in Baltimore where cops have talked to internal affairs and they come outside and there's a rat on their windshield. Well, it's put there by another cop.
Yeah. And it didn't take more than that, the time it took him to get back to his car.
Right. So there you go. I just think you're at that point where you've got that level of criminality, and it's not a total thing where all cops are bad.
Yeah.
So when I say bad stuff about cops, it kind of bothers me because I know chances are if a cop hears it, it's not going to be a bad cop that hears it. But you know what? They know.
I think they do, especially knowing that you're in Baltimore. We have lots of very decent cops here, and they would hear your 30% estimate and just totally balk. But, you're in Baltimore. We have lots of news stories and evidence that it's true. It's a corrupt situation there.
We're tilting towards a third world situation where you're more afraid of the cops than anybody.
Well, I think Baltimore is at least from your description, it's well into it's third world already. You're already there. That's third world.
We're leading the way.
Yeah.
We're going to take the rest of you people down with us. Okay.
I know.
Enjoy your your white picket fence and your roses while you can. All right.
It's not quite that first world here either. This is California, where we can't pave roads and we can't, we can't do anything here. It's crazy. But just in terms of like your personal safety and that you're just liable to get attacked at any moment, that's already a third world. I don't know how your infrastructure is there. It's probably terrible. Thank you for listening to part 2 of episode 6 of the Crackpot Podcast with James LaFond and Lynn Lockhart.